So, anyways, hey, let's get on to the comedy, shall we? That ate up a good chunk of the show. So,
All right.
folks, yeah, we're going to talk about the Three Stooges and the Marx Brothers. I am a Stooge fan, and Mathew Steele is a Stooge fan too, but he knows more about the Marx Brothers. So let's just talk about a little bit about the Marx Brothers and the Stooges. Who do you think was funnier?
It depends on the type of comedy, because I think that's very important. Like, it's kind of like horror. Some people like really gory, visceral horror, and some people like the more psychological horror. Comedy is the same way. What makes you laugh? What do
Are you there?
you think is people can stand Will Ferrell? And I think that's really the way we have to approach this problem as well. Who's funnier, the Marx Brothers or the Three Stooges? Well, if you're just talking slapstick, it's probably the Three Stooges. But if you're talking about overall comedy, because they were so varied in the types of comedy they pulled off successfully and brilliantly, it would have to be the Marx Brothers.
I love
So in
them
that sense,
both.
I think the Three Stooges were more narrow in their scope, but they were still very, very good.
yeah, I love them both. When people ask me that, it's like, are you kidding me? It's like asking which one of your kids you love more. It's like, are you crazy? I love them both. They're both, I could, I love when my kid, it's weird. Before they didn't like the Stooges, and I remember the first laugh that my daughter ever had was watching the Marx Brothers. She just laughed at something Harpo did. And it's funny because you're talking about something that took place 90 years ago, okay? Where she literally giggled, like she just went, ha, like, and I remember just being stunned, and realizing this child's got a great sense of humor. If you laugh at Groucho, you've got a fantastic sense of humor. And my son laughed at Curly because I play the Stooges and the Marx Brothers all the time. Just when I'm on the computer or whatever, I'll play them, and it just, I don't know what it would. I just enjoy the old movies. I just enjoy. To me, it was a simpler time. You think back and go, if you had cancer or anything back then, you were kind of screwed. These days, you're in better shape. If you had to go to the dentist, I mean, these are same things that happened back then. So some of these things happened in the doctor's office. Some of them happened. Some of the comedy happened. Dentistry and the different. If they go to a police station or whatever, it's like, time has stood still. These things are timeless, and I just love the whole. My kid will sit there and go, "Dad, can we just watch the Stooges?" And we'll sit. I'll make popcorn. We sit down, and he'll go, "Who's Curly's his favorite?" And when I was a kid, Curly was my favorite too. And just to watch him laugh, because I know where this. Yeah, I've seen it so many times. I know exactly, what's going to happen. Who's going to get hit. Just Curly's. Just his behavior is timeless. These days you look at some comics and you just think, fuck you. You really have no idea. When people sit there and go, oh, this person's funny or this person's funny, I'm thinking, nah, you have no idea. You really have no idea. Watch old Stooges. Even watch Abbott and Costello. Watch them, and you'll just sit there and go, this is honest to good belly laugh, which is so missed in this day and age. And the Stooges, just real quick, they were around. Do you know how long they've been around?
I think they started performing in the 40s.
No, 1928.
If I remember correctly.
1928 till 1970.
Really?
Yep. They were a vaudeville. They did vaudeville, but they were, for years, they worked, the vaudeville. And if people don't know what vaudeville was, it's like going to go to a matinee show. You go see a show, you'd see a juggler. Guys would come out and do comedy. You'd see dancers, you'd see tits, legs. Then another guy would come out. Like, it's so sad, like a burlesque show. If I do a burlesque show now and I do stand up, it's so sad because these days, if I do a burlesque show and then I'll bring up another comic or whatever, no one's into it because they're all horny and, I want to see more tits. It's so sad. I'm like, you guys, we'll bring out the strippers again. But, it's like, are you fucking insane? Like, you can't handle, a show. You think that the show is just strippers? But that's what vaudeville was back then. You would have the guys would come out, do a whole bunch of silly things. You could see magic, you see juggling, and God, you'd pay like 5 cents to go in. These guys did not make a whole lot of money, and they would work on these acts. And the brothers, the Howard brothers, they were really Howitz. They I can't remember where they came from, but they came from another country. I think they were half Jewish, and it was Moe, Shemp, Larry, and Curly, and then later on Joe Besser.
Right, but Larry was the fine. He was.
Yeah, Larry was a fine. Yeah. So, Larry was. What happened with Larry was, they just one day Larry used to play the fiddle, right? And what happened was he was out there playing. And the brothers went out, grabbed him, and they just thought it was hilarious. So they brought him into the act, and they were doing silly stuff with Larry. And Larry had a callus. A lot of people didn't know this. His fucking left cheek had a callus from Moe smacking the shit out of him for years. Wonderful, just great stuff. A lot of people don't know about Larry Fine. When he was a little boy, his dad, I guess, was a jeweler. And they had acid, and he went and grabbed, when he was little, he went and grabbed the acid, and it fell on his arm, and it burnt his arm. They took him to the hospital. He really had severe burns on his arm. They took him to the doctor. The doctor said, well, to get him, his arm moving, teach him how to play violin. He started playing violin, and, he was actually a really good violinist. Now, funny thing about Larry, he was the guy that would always get the pussy, and he was known back then. I mean, they didn't have cell phones or anything like that, but he got caught with, cheating on his wife. And do you know what he had to do when he was out of town? Matt, do you know what he had to do? He would have to call his wife from a hotel room at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever time, and yell out. She'd say, all right, say it. He'd talk to his wife, and he'd have to yell out, there is no dirty whore in this room with me. So if there was if there was a girl in there, she would completely feel embarrassed. But she would force him to say these things because he was constantly out there getting, laid. He was a Casanova, Larry.
Never would have guessed it.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that amazing? It's just, and then over the years, it was Shemp was the older brother. Moe was, the bowl cut one. But Shemp was originally the first Stooge. See, when I was little, it bothered me that Shemp showed up. I hated Shemp. I love Shemp now because I understand that, Shemp had his own style. He's hilarious. But I so loved Curly. Shemp was the original. What happened was Shemp could not stand Ted Healy. Ted Healy and his Stooges. There was a guy named Ted Healy. And in 1920 or 22, he had a show, and the Stooges was his idea, where he'd bring out guys and they would do this whole, the Stooge thing, where you'd go out, me and you would go on stage, we get into something silly, I'd slap you, you'd slap me, which people, they'd laugh, and so you were considered a stooge. So he came up with that. So it was known as Ted Healy and his Stooges. What happened with Shemp was the original stooge. Shemp couldn't stand Ted because Ted drank too much, and Shemp's wife did not like him at all. I guess he was a womanizer, and he used to say some pretty rough things. So Shemp left, and Shemp, believe it or not, if you ever get the chance, he's been in so many old movies. He was in he was in Buster Keaton's. No, it wasn't Buster. It was what's his name? Oh God, he played the bartender in so many movies, but he had his own career as a actor, and he was successful. So he said, "Screw this, I'm going to go on." And Mo thought, we're screwed. Shemp was great. Shemp's real name was Solomon, but his mom couldn't say. When she tried to say it in English, it would come out as Sol, so it stayed as Shemp. No, she'd say Shemp. So they called him Shemp. But yeah. Anyways, yeah. So he left, and they didn't know what to do, and they finally Jerome, who was Curly. Curly's real name is Jerome. Came in, and the Ted Healy said, "This guy's just too good looking. I can't, he can't be a stooge." So Curly said, I'm gonna go. I'll be right back. He ran off to a barber, cut off all of his hair, came back, took off his hat, and Ted Healy said he looks girly, and Mo thought he said curly. So he said, all right, you're curly, and thought this is fantastic. And so, anyways, Shemp was the original that ended up leaving. So, anyways, they were fantastic for years. That lineup went on forever, and over the years, of course, Curly passed away. I believe it was early, like he passed away in the 50s or something, and then they brought in Shemp. Shemp took over. Shemp was around for 10 years. Shemp died of a heart attack. And then that's when they brought in Joe Besser and then Joe DeRita, which Curly Joe. And I never liked those guys. Like,
no.
To me, it was just DeRita. I mean, Besser was okay. He had that, you hit too hard. At least he brought something different. But DeRita, I just never found him funny. I'm sure he was a super nice guy, but he just never did it for me. What are you going to do? Like, Mo wanted to keep it going. And what happened was with Mo, Ted Healy was making like $1,000 off of them for every $100 they were in. Like, it was like, it's like you bust your ass and then you get $100 and I get $1,000. And the Stooges said, this is ridiculous. We'll do this on our own. But they couldn't use the name Stooges. So they went and did their own thing. And Ted Healy brought in a bunch of new guys to be Stooges. But they were nowhere to the caliber of Mo and Shemp and Larry. That went tits up. And then finally Ted brought them back. They were good for a while, and then they finally got out of the contract by signing. I think they signed with, was it Paramount? They worked with for years. They were like for 23 years straight. They worked with Paramount. No, they worked with Healy 1928 to 1934, and then they got over to the Columbia. I'm sorry, it was a Columbia short. The Columbia short, that was 1934 to 1947. And then that went on for years, and unceremoniously, they were dropped, and then they didn't even have a goodbye party for these guys. They didn't have anything. They showed up at the gate. This shows you the gratitude. They showed up at the gate, and they weren't allowed in. They were just told, it's over, And what a bunch of fucking weasels. They didn't make a dime off the shorts. They were making money off of just going to do shows at theaters and stuff. And they had no idea how incredibly famous they were. They had no idea. And Shemp returned in 1947 till 1955. And they kind of, Mo asked him if he'd come back, and Shemp was all cool. he was like, okay, until our little brother Babe, they used to call him Babe because he was the smallest. When Larry, I'm sorry, Curly, when Curly gets better, because Curly suffered a heart attack, and he was pretty messed up for a while. Shemp said, until he gets better, I'll take over for him. So that was really cool of him.
From what I understand, Curly was completely different in person than his persona.
Yes, big time. He was a very shy man. They said very shy. And what was sad was he wasn't shy when he'd be drinking. So he would get shit-faced and had no problem talking to people. But it was kind of like, how you act in front of your buddies that you've known for a while, and then a bunch of new people show up, and you're just very stand-up. You're just uncomfortable around them. And I think he was always comfortable around his brothers, and Larry. He was very comfortable around them until new people came along. Like, when he would go on the ground and start spinning, and you thought, oh, that was written. That was him. He forgot his lines. And Mo would say he would do these things where he would just start spinning on the ground and woo, 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 until he realized what his lines were, and he'd get up and he'd say his lines, which they kept it in because it was gold. He used to be really annoyed with, he was really worried that the Marx Brothers were stealing his bits, like his silliness. So from the studio, because remember, the Marx were doing full feature movies, and the Stooges weren't, and the Stooges were not happy about that. They were like, we should be getting, full movies, and they're like, no, you're the.
Well, they did some.
They did a couple, but nowhere near.
They did a few, but they were all later on.
Yeah, but it was kind of like today, like where people go Saturday Night Live, where they go, hey, we can make a movie out of this, and it's like, fuck, don't. Are you kidding me? Just make a short out of it. Like you could see it working as a short, but to make a movie, a full movie, where the Marx Brothers were masters of, what was it? The one of my favorite was the opera. Remember Duck Soup was fantastic.
Oh yeah.
But the
Night at the
Opera was absolutely one of the funniest movies ever made. It just, from beginning to end, so strong. And to have the Marx doing a short, I can't see that. I can't see them doing shorts because it just never worked with Groucho being the way Groucho could set up a joke. I remember Groucho was a very smart wordy guy. He didn't just throw out words just to hear himself talk. They were like seriously well thought out jokes, and they weren't very slapstick, unless there were some parts where. Do you remember when they did that? What was that movie? The one where the guy came in, and they were in an apartment, but they kept moving the scenery. The guy thought he was losing his mind. Do you remember they just kept moving things around on the guy? They were eating, and they
that was, I believe that was let's see, it wasn't Monkey Business. That would have been A Night at the Opera.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. They kept they were driving the man crazy.
It was A Night at the Opera.
That was incredibly funny. I mean, that scene holds up to this day, where the man would show up, they would move things around. Absolutely brilliant.
You know how they practiced, right?
No,
they would go on stage and practice their bits, and they would change out the jokes.
Right.
And they would see what got the greatest laughs, and then that's the jokes that they would do in the movie.
Right, because you got to remember they didn't have back then. None of these guys had a laugh track. I mean, the laugh track showed up in the 70s. These guys, right. If you showed it to a studio head, and they would sit there and watch it, and they didn't laugh, you were screwed. So they really wanted to make sure that we get laughs from this. I mean, to make movies back then, it's not like today where you can make a movie on your camera. It cost a fortune, okay, back then. So they had to make sure that film, they used film, that they were getting gold, and they would work at it and work at it. And Groucho was fantastic for it. Who was your favorite Marx?
Oh, that I would have to say Harpo,
I like Harpo, but
just because of his heart.
yeah, he was a sweet guy. He was a sweet guy, but I love Groucho. I've always loved Groucho.
I, Groucho, he definitely speaks to my subversive self, like that. Damn the man, kind of always rooting for the underdog. He tried so hard in the movies to be the elite. He tried to be the fat cat, the Donald Trump, and he always failed. So he ended up throwing in with the you know tried and true subversives, the Chico and Harpo. And a lot of people don't know that Chico is pronounced Chico, but it's because he was always going after the chicks.
Yes, he
was. It's not Chico.
Yeah, Chico.
He was a womanizer. Yes. He was also he had a huge gambling problem.
Oh fuck!
And a lot of the work that they did, a lot of the work that they did was to pay off his gambling debts, and he would steal from the others. Yeah. If they had money hidden, they ever since they were kids, because Chico was the oldest. Mm-hmm. Ever since they were kids, Chico, he would steal whatever they had, any money that they had, and he would go gambling with it.
When he
tried their best to keep him reined in, but yeah,
when he hit rock bottom, it's not like today where they'd leave you hanging. The brothers actually loved each other, and they would give him. See, it got to the point when he used to hang out at the club. There was the big what is it, the golfing club or some type of club. It cost a fortune to be a member there, and he lost his membership there. So all the brothers chipped in, and they got him the membership, but they only gave him an allowance because he was a degenerate gambler, so he was allowed to have.
He was.
Yeah,
he was pathological.
Yeah, he was really, really bad, and he would do stuff where. They were always worried. There would be like some beautiful star, and they would just tell him, now, Chico, please do not say anything stupid to her. Just be nice, be kind. And of course, this beautiful star would come in, and she'd go, hello, I'm such and such. And he'd go, hi, I'm Chico, and I'd really love to fuck you. And, and he'd always end up porking them, but he would just... he was a womanizer. He would just, hey, you got nice tits, incredibly talented man too. Funny, talented. Do you ever see him on it was an old show. He came out dressed, and they had him in full costume, and he had a little pouch around his neck, and they asked, why, what do you got in the pouch? And he goes, oh, when we were kids, you'd have your marbles in there, you'd have a bit of money, you'd have a bit of marijuana. And they let it go, like people are just like, it was kind of like nobody heard him say that. It was like, you got some marijuana in there. And so he was quite the party animal. And I get it. Who I felt bad for, who was always worried for money, was Groucho. Groucho lost a fortune at the stock market. People don't know that he lost a shitload of money. And, everything he worked for fucking was gone. And that the huge stock market crash. So they were, they've had hard times, the brothers.
But like with Frank Capra movies like Mr. Deeds Goes to Town and Meet John Doe and You Can't Take It With You, the Marx Brothers really cashed in on the mentality of the downtrodden, the people who are the forgotten men, and the ones who were really suffering during the Depression. The Marx Brothers were their heroes because they always got the better of the rich cats. They always went up against the powerful and always won. And that was, I think, what sort of turned them into folk heroes for that generation, was that they weren't just a comedy outlet, a comedy group. They were also someone who that they could the viewer or the audience member could live vicariously through their victory.
Sure. Yes.
They were so subversive, so they really stuck it to the today would be like what we would consider the 1%, but that was back during the Great Depression in the late 20s and early 30s, when they had their biggest movies were in the early 1930s. Mm-hmm. So it would have been at the very worst of the Depression.
Yes. Yeah, and they would, anything they would do, I mean, even I remember they would show how silly war was. They would, Fedoria, they would fight over something silly. God, he was hilarious. I mean, the fucking one-liners he would come up with. Are you going to fight for her honor? No? Well, somebody should. I mean, he just constantly had something. He was so quick.
Oh, boy, Margaret Dumont.
Oh, yes, I love that one.
Margaret Dumont. Margaret Dumont, they were on a train once and they stole all of her clothes, and then they told the conductor of the train that she was a prostitute. So the only thing that she was wearing was a fur coat. Oh. She had no clothes on under it.
I didn't know that.
They told the conductor that she was a prostitute. Oh, yeah. And she was a great sport, but she didn't get most of their jokes.
Oh, no. She would laugh, and Groucho even said she just didn't understand.
She had no idea. Right. She didn't get it. And that was the funniest part, is that she was such a good sport and she was just being herself. That's her. She's not pretending.
Yeah.
She's just being Margaret Dumont.
Yes.
That's the great part.
Yeah, that's the part that I love. I love that she never got it, because you know why? She was a lady. She wasn't, this type of, she wasn't she was, I believe she came from a rich family, and she really didn't need to be an actress, but she became an actress, got these roles, and she was never, a very pampered life where, men did not speak like pigs to her until she met Checo. So she would never hang out with Checo or deal with men. Back then, it was a totally different time. Men and women did not hang out. Okay, you didn't have I'm meeting my friend. Who's your friend? Some girl. It just didn't happen back then. You would go out as a group, or
right.
It was just a different time. It was very respectful. You couldn't do the. So I could see that she was a very and a sweet woman, very large woman, and that was having Groucho all over her, pretty much raping her in a scene, just kissing her, and so he hated her. He disliked her, but loved her money. You know what I mean, and protected her from anybody else that was going to take her money away. It was wonderful. He was just such
they really did. They loved her.
Oh yeah,
she was like one of the Marx Brothers. They really did love her, and the movies that she was in were their best, just because of it's like Abbott and Costello. Taking one of them away. Well, the Marx Brothers were the Abbott, and the Marx Brothers were the Costello, and she was the Abbott. She was the straight man or the straight woman for their act, and it was genius. And you actually had 5 Marx Brothers. Only 4 of them ever made movies together, but their best movies were just the 3 of them.
Yes,
I think.
I couldn't stand. I was never into the singing part when they would always bring out some big star, and even who was it that said it? Was it Abbott and Costello said, or Groucho looked. Groucho did something perfect. He looked into the camera. He was the first guy to break the barrier, right?
Between
the fourth wall. He broke it and went in, and he just said to the crowd, "Buddy's going to sing right now, so if you want, go to the lobby and get yourself some snacks." And that's what the kids did.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, okay, he's going to sing.
Yeah.
I'm going to go get some snacks. And they go get their snacks, and hopefully Buddy will be done singing because, kids just didn't care if you were singing. That was kind of like an adult kind of thing. Oh, let's watch them sing. But Groucho knew that. And just to do that to the audience was brilliant. I mean, he was so ahead of his time, so incredibly smart man. Even if you see him, years later in the 70s, he had the show. He was always a smart man. Never found. I'm with him. He never found women funny, and he would tell them straight to their face, "Women are not funny."
I thought Margaret Dumont was hysterical, though.
No, yeah, but in a different
That's
way.
the irony of it.
You ever see when what's her name? She just passed away. I think was it 2 years ago now? Joan Rivers. Joan Rivers came on his show when she was starting out as a young comic, and he let her do a bit of time, and she went up and did a couple jokes on the show, and he just stared at her. He didn't crack a smile. He didn't. Oh, it was brutal. He wouldn't give her a laugh, and he just didn't. He never found women funny. Where they, he just thought, making people laugh is a guy thing. And over the years, there was a young man, I think it was Ken Burns, that became friends with him, and he would set up he would set up a camera, and he would play the old movies, and they would sit there and they would watch the old movies, and he'd explain to you. He had a velvet voice. A lot of people didn't know that. If you ever listen to Groucho speak, when he's not in character, he has this wonderful, smooth voice. Velvet, just wonderful. Hypnotic voice. Sweet man. And he would show these wonderful old bits that he would do. To people. And I remember the guy sitting there saying, I met him, and now here I am with my idol, watching Groucho tell me about the movie that he's in, and letting him know about how they shot it. I think there was one with it was a gorilla, and the guy brought a gorilla, and the guy who was in the gorilla was sweating his balls off. So the guy put holes into the costume, and the guy who owned the gorilla costume, because it was a real gorilla costume, it was real gorilla skin. And back then, of course, they didn't, it was these days, not going to happen. But back then, they had real gorilla skin. And the guy freaked out once he found out that you put holes in my costume. So he grabbed the gorilla skin and left. And they had to look all over Hollywood to find another gorilla skin, and all they could find was a little monkey skin. So they got a midget to play. It was just funny because if you ever see the movie, there's a giant gorilla, a guy in a gorilla suit, and then the next scene is a little fucking, they had to shoot the thing. It was a little guy in a totally different suit. So it's just funny shit like that. And that would have been so surreal to just sit there with them. To sit there with a Groucho or any of the Stooges, they passed away when I was 5. I believe he passed away. The two, Larry and Moe, passed away. No, I'm sorry, 1974. So I was 4 years old. I would have loved to have met them, and it's really weird when people, my kid goes, "Well, Dad, you should meet them," and I'm like, "Son, it's impossible. They're gone." "Well, what do you mean they're gone?" "Or they died years ago." "When they die?" "They died, fucking." I didn't say fucking to the boy, but I go, "They died about 42 years ago." He doesn't understand, and it's so sad. I'm like, it's a shame, It's kind of like, but that's the beauty of film. It captures that person in time. They're always going to be there, but it would be so nice to meet them.
I wish I could have. I mean, of all the people from the old movies that I wish I could have met, I think that seeing them live would have been. And at the time, you don't know how great it is. This piece of history that you're part of. You don't know, and that's the great thing about watching these old movies is you're getting to watch with the Marx Brothers. You're getting to watch what was essentially the same thing they were doing on vaudeville, but they had done it so many times they'd perfected it into something like a George Carlin's routines. He just memorized all of it. He would just start at one end and just keep going, and he almost never flubbed a line. And the Marx Brothers were doing the same thing. They were just performing the same thing in the movie that they had performed on the stage.
Yes.
So it gives you an idea of how important it would have felt to someone and broke and forgotten and depressed and being able to take part in that victory.
Like to be around some of the most brilliant I mean, the eye poke that came about. Larry one day they were playing they used to play poker all the time, and Larry was a degenerate gambler that would always borrow money off of Mo. And Mo, he'd always forget. It'd be like me borrowing money off of you, and I'd get, could I borrow $10? Well, what about the other, 40 that I've given you? What 40? What are you talking about? Well, $40. And you don't. I know a guy like that. I'd constantly lend him money, and he would just go, "What are you talking about?" It's like, dude, you owe me $50. No, I don't. Yes, you do. And they genuinely forget because they've borrowed so much money off of everybody else. So, what Mo would do is whip out his dick. And Larry, what the hell did you do that for? And he goes, well, that way you remember, that you owe me money. Like it was kind of like, see, you saw my dick, now you owe me money. So that way you'll never forget. So everybody used to get a kick out of that. And then
That's pretty good.
Yeah, what happened was they were playing poker, and Larry poked Mo in the eye, like the double poke, the two fingers in the eye. And Mo laughed so hard. Just thought we got to put that in the act, and he just, okay. And they put that, and it's a famous, I just watched, Halloween. I had, Army of Dead. There was that famous scene with the skeletons, and where he falls down, and the skeletons are doing the Stooges on him. Where they're poking him in the eye, and he's got a, he blocks it with his hands. And even my son realized this is from the Stooges, and I'm like, yes, this is the Army of Darkness. You remember that scene where he falls down and all the skeletons start poking and prodding at him? That was homage to the Stooges.
That was in Short Circuit too.
Yes. It just shows you. I remember Mel Brooks had his, in Lethal Weapon when he went cuckoo and did his whole Stooge. He was a huge Stooge fan. That was, it's just timeless. And they never, the Marx Brothers or the Stooges, I don't think they realized how incredibly famous they were. The years of laughter that they bring, I don't get that. To bring that to people is such a gift. I think bringing laughter is a gift. To me, whenever, I think of something good, I always think of an old, a laugh. You don't have to, pay, or, you don't have to, it's not going to make you full, but it'll make you happy. It'll give you that momentary feeling of joy. And they've brought that for years. They did that for years. That it's so sad to know, they're gone. I wish they kind of knew, I wish that, they would realize, there's this generation now, they just won't take the time to watch these things. They won't, they're like, I remember talking to my neighbor about it. I go, hey, what do you think of the Stooges? He's like, I never watched them. And I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, how do you not, I don't get it. What's there not to get? It's just very confusing. It's like, I don't like ice cream. Well, what do you mean you don't like ice cream? You don't like chocolate? No, I don't like chocolate. It's just very weird. So I don't hang out with them that much just for that.
all three of them in as a Marx Brothers movie was Love Happy.
Love Happy, was that one with Marilyn Monroe?
Yeah, Marilyn Monroe, 1949, 48, 49. And that was the last one they all did together.
Did you ever see the one where all three brothers, all three Stooges are together? What happened was Curly he had his heart attack, and it was a short in 1947. It was called Hold That Line, and Curly played a he couldn't play. He had a heart attack, and he was sick, and they brought him in. They thought it'd be nice for him to sit on the train. He was the passenger. He had his hat over his head, and they just walked by and they said something to him, and it was Curly, and it was just they were just trying to be sweet and trying to don't worry, when you get better, you'll Shemp will give you the old gig back, which Shemp would have no problem doing that. But it was just one of those moments that are very, that are cool, that they were trying to bring their little brother back.
I remember he had one line and he couldn't move.
Yeah.
So he was laying there, and that's beautiful. I was talking to my dad about that actually just a couple of weeks ago, but he never did get better. No, unfortunately.
No. He used to drive. God, he went through like 3 wives, and then what happened was he used to always get stray dogs. He loved dogs. And he would bring them home, and he would, drive the wife crazy. And he finally had a kid, and he was spending time at home. But it was a different time. They just didn't have the, the medicines or anything like that to take care of him these days, like they did back then. And he passed away, at a young age, and he was the youngest brother too. He used to be called Babe because I think Mo used to. I think he was 13 years old. They went hunting or something, and he shot himself in the ankle. And Mo got him to hospital before he bled to death. But he's always had this weird, this weird walk. And that always bothered him. He always had that kind of that stammer that you never really see in the movies because he's always walking silly. He's a like he could steal a scene, no problem. I mean, any scene he's in, he'll steal it. But yeah, he loved Mo like crazy, and Mo loved him back. They used to call him Babe, and it's just so shit that he passed away. Yeah, it sucks. And then, of course, Shemp did a great job. But then they brought in, like, fucking, Besser. I didn't get that. And then Joe DeRita, just awful. Having Joe in there was just fucking absolutely horrendous.
No, this is supposed to be a funny show, and we're turning into a sad show. That's not good.
I know, but, all good things must come to an end. We'll do more of this. What are your final thoughts on the Stooges, the Marx Brothers? To me, it's just good comedy. That's all. Good comedy.
Well, I'd have to say that if you're not familiar with, it's probably more likely that people are familiar with the Three Stooges than the Marx Brothers. Just because the Three Stooges were on television a lot more. While I was growing up, it was more likely that you'd run across one of their shorts than it was that you'd run across a Marx Brothers movie. But if you're not familiar with the Marx Brothers, you owe it to yourself to see what comedy can do, how good it really gets. A Night at the Opera, Duck Soup, and I'm going to say Monkey Business. are probably the three best of theirs. And you just can consider that it's going on 100 years ago. It's really very impressive how ahead of their time they were, because
Yes,
they're
they were.
doing things in those movies that are funnier than anything you're going to see today.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. And I screwed up. The Mo and Larry, they passed away in 1975, not 74. So they were. I was 5 years old when they passed. But yeah, I tell anybody, just go out there, like go see. You can watch them on YouTube. For goodness sakes, watch them. Watch the old movies. They take you to a different time. Sit back, get some popcorn, you laugh your head off. I mean, some of this city, like just, how can you not laugh if you don't laugh at the Stooges or Marx Brothers? Something is fucked up with you. Something's just not right. So yeah, and if somebody says they don't like the Stooges or the Marx Brothers, don't hang out with them. Just tell them to go away because they're untrustworthy. They're weirdos. Okay. So
Yep, I'd agree with that.
yeah, like don't hang with people like that because you don't need that shit. So, folks, you've been listening to the Wrecking Crew Comedy Podcast. I'm Vito D'Amico. I want to thank Mathew Steele. Thank you so much, Mathew.
Don't thank me, just send the check.
All right, I shall. So yeah, we'll do other bits about that if you don't mind. About yeah, it's got to be funnier. I'm sorry, I go on the downers, but it's kind of hard. It's just when you're talking about people that have passed, you think about you reminisce so much, and you're like, oh, they're gone. And you wish they weren't, but they're never really gone. So
Yeah,
go check out
maybe
their
we can
things.
do Mel Brooks next time.
Oh, I love Mel Brooks. I'll tell you all about the Blazing Saddles and how people thought I was racist. I told this guy I was working with that. He's like, well, I was working nights, and I was a guard, and he was a guard, and we were working at a hospital, and there was a library at the hospital. It was closed, but you could still go in there and rent a movie. And he goes, what would be a good movie to watch? And I said, Blazing Saddles. I love that movie. And he went and watched it, and he stopped speaking to me. And I go, well, what's wrong with him? And he's like, well, he thinks you're a racist. I'm like, well, why would he think I'm a racist? He goes, well, that movie, that Blazing Saddle movie. I'm like, oh, for fuck's sakes, it's over. It's all over. This is what it's come to. You know, Thank God I didn't tell him to watch Debbie Does Dallas. That's all I'm saying. Fuck. But yeah, next
People
time.
need to lighten the fuck up.
Oh yeah,
and
huge.
The political correctness, of the modern generation. It's when you lose the ability to take a joke, there's a problem.
Yeah.
If it's just a joke, that's all it is. Somebody's just trying to make a laugh, not insult you because they think you're a shit person, but just to make a laugh at your expense.
Yeah, all the Blazing Saddles shows how stupid white people were. That's all. Like, it was just showing how incredibly stupid white people were. So that was the point of the movie, So I didn't get, I don't know. But anyways, I digress. Is that right to say that? What does digress even mean? What's that mean?
You went off on a tangent.
All right. Yeah, all right. That's good. So now I know what that means. So I digress. Folks, until next time, I'm Vito D'Amico. Thank you so much, Mathew. Listen to the Wrecking Crew. Tell me how we're doing. And tell me your favorite. If we screwed anything up about the Stooges or anything you want to let me know, let me know. And if you want to hear more, let me know. Message me. I got some guy who I'll tell you after what he said, but it was really cool. It was funny. So, folks, adios. Be good. Have a good weekend, and don't kill yourselves. Watch the Stooges and the Marx Brothers. Ciao.